an earth-based soul has a lot of human experience. That doesn't mean they've cleaned up all their karma. That doesn't mean they're a 10 on a scale of 10 in terms of evolution. But it means we as earth-based souls are fairly comfortable in a human body on this planet.
Are you curious whether you are an earth-based soul, interplanetary-based soul, or an angelic realm soul? Maybe you'd like to really understand who is your higher self? Who is your greater soul? Who are your spirit guides? How does this all work? If these are any of your questions, my friend, sit back, put on your seatbelt. We are going for a deep ride into the spiritual end of the world. This conversation is going to blow your mind. I am so excited for you to hear what I just discovered and uncovered with Dr. Linda Bachman. Stay tuned, stay here, and of course, leave your comments, your questions, especially if you're tuning in on YouTube. I respond to everyone. Hopefully we'll bring her back and would love to know, what would you love to know more of? What kind of soul are you? Let us know in the comments. I'm not going to share which kind I am. If you listen, you will find out, but I'd love to hear what you intuitively feel. So I hope you love this conversation. I hope it brings greater clarity, helps you to really tune into your youest you, your higher self, and the divinity that is you. With so much love. Enjoy. All right. So I'm so excited. We're welcoming all of our USU community members here. Thank you, Dr. Linda Bachman. I'm so excited to have a conversation with you. I know this is going to be one that really blesses everyone that tunes in. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm excited. I saw you in an interview on Gaia TV, and my intuition it was like chills. You lit up, and I know when I get that, I write in and I invite whoever it is that I have that experience with. And I just said, we've got to have a conversation. The work you do, the incredible, the way that you connect in with at the soul level, with the other side, and a spiritual level. This is going to be a powerful conversation. So I'm excited. Let's dive in. Yeah, let's do it.
Perfect.
Let's start with, I'd love to hear a little bit about your own personal story. How did you get into the work you do, into different kinds of souls being here on the planet and regressions, and just, was this something you knew when you were younger? Was this came through your own? Like, let's get a little bit about you and how you got to what you're doing.
Okay, perfect. Well, I always say, I'll say this briefly, when I work with clients tend to come in sort of two flavors. And by that, I mean, some of my clients, Julie, are people, you kind of just mentioned this. Some of my clients are people that have been spiritually oriented since they were kids. Like they knew they had a guide, or a grandmother they never met came into their bedroom and supported them. So one flavor is people that have known there's something more than this life, this body, since they were 5, 12, 15, that kind of thing. The other flavor, which I am the other flavor Y versus flavor X. Flavor Y is people that come into spiritual awareness well into their adult years, because there's a purpose to the timing. So that's me. So my story, without giving you my whole long life story, I'll touch on just one brief event that happened when I was 25 years old, and then fast forward to the actual event that opened the door. So when I was 25 years old, I was married to my husband, to whom I am still married. And I was pregnant with our second child, and that was a very challenging pregnancy. And that pregnancy was a premature birth. That second son of ours was born alive and lived a short time and passed. And I learned what classic grief is all about. I learned about not spirituality, but what happens when we have a major loss of any type in our life. So that led me to become a client with a psychotherapist, actually with a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist early in my life. And I became fascinated with the grief process, with therapy, and that led me to become a psychologist. So that's what happened, except that had nothing to do with soul, reincarnation, and what I do today. Then, Julie, fast forward about another 20 years. I'm about 45 years old at the time. This is now about 30 years ago. I'm about 45 at the time. I'm a psychologist in private practice. It's a group practice of psychologists and psychiatrists. My male colleague with whom we built the practice has been diagnosed with a type of lung cancer, and at age 32, in 1993, he passes from the cancer because of the cancer. He dies, he crosses over. I understand, like a little fingernail's worth of reincarnation and soul, and barely knew much of anything. He crosses over. His nickname was Bud. Bud crosses over, and I start experiencing him talking to me from the other side. And he begins to show me past lives we've shared. So I think, this is crazy. This is weird. What's causing this? But at the same time, I was pretty fascinated with what I knew in my sort of intuitive heart and soul was real. So I said to my husband and I have always been pretty liberal people. We never, still to this day seems funny, we'd never talked about reincarnation. My husband is a retired university professor. So my husband, Earl, sits down. I say, okay, here's what's going on for me. Earl knew Bud. They played golf together at times and had lunch. So I explained to Earl what's going on. And I honestly think that my spouse is going to go, honey, what is wrong with you? But he doesn't. He looks back at me calmly. So I said to him, Julie, I said, so why don't you think this is really crazy? And here's what Earl said now 30 plus years ago. He said, I guess I blocked something from my childhood. I said, what do you mean? Earl said, well, and Earl and I are about the same age. Earl said, only now do I remember that when I was a boy in my private time and space, outdoors usually, I began to remember my past lives in detail. Earl said, I knew they were my lives. I knew they were real. But he said, no one in my world ever talked about that. So he said, I guess I just tucked it all away and forgot for maybe 35 years. So Earl said, if you're interested, go for it. Go forward, do what you want with this. He said, I'll go with you to programs and conferences. I don't have to go with you. But that was an open door for me. It was really, we might call it carte blanche of, take this where you want to take it. Yeah. It was a blessing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A blessing, I would imagine, actually, probably for both of you, and so from there, because I know you had the psychiatrist background, what happened next? Because today with what you do,
Right.
so you had Bud coming to you, connecting with you, sensing past lives together, opening, I'm seeing this like door open, right?
Yeah.
In later in life. And then how did you take that experience and get into the work you do today?
Yeah. In the beginning, it was a little bit two tracks, if you will. The track over here was the me that can be very mental. I know a lot now, of course, about my soul and past lives. So I know about my soul archetype, which is quite mental. So the track sort of on one side of me was, oh, but Linda, this, self-talk. Oh, but Linda, most of your referrals into your private practice come from medical doctors. They think you're grounded. They think, you're a black and white thinker in certain ways. What will happen if you go off in this unique direction that generally psychologists don't go off in this direction? But then the other part of me was I'm so fascinated. I'm so interested. I'm so drawn, blah, blah, blah. Um, and thankfully, and I know that's what my guides would say today, thankfully and gradually, I let myself follow, you know, track two versus track one. And the steps were slow. Um, I discovered an organization 30 years ago that supported past life regression. They did training, so I started taking training in past life regression. Then I came upon the regression tool that I've used for years and years, which was originally designed by the seminal teacher and author who was once one of my mentors, Dr. Michael Newton. I discovered Michael's work. He was just beginning to publish his work. He'd been doing it for years. And he too was a formally credentialed psychotherapist. And I took one of his earliest trainings. And so I began to do, to try to make this simple. Obviously, it's 30 years worth of not so simple, but I began to do regression that is when I guide the client first step into a past life, and the client is gaining the information. The client really is channeling their own information. The client is moving through the past life. The past life they discover is selected by their guides, which would include their higher self. And higher self is maybe something that would be useful for us to talk about the value of higher self. But we move through the past life scene by scene. We go to the final scene. I jokingly say to clients, you're going to die today, but you're only going to die in the past life. And you as a human, you're not going to feel like you're dying, but you will know you died of old age. You died of influenza 400 years ago. We're going to close the life because sometimes we have lives that aren't sufficiently released energetically and emotionally. So we go to the end of the past life, and then the sizable piece of the regression is then we work at the client's level of higher self. Then we work at the client's soul level to learn many different details of who they are as a soul, which I can, tell you a bit more about, but I'll stop with that at least for the moment.
Yeah. Beautiful. Amazing. Yeah. I would love to dive into all these different aspects. Number one, getting into the higher self. We will talk about the different kinds of souls here and different levels. Let's start with the higher self. Let's kind of create what that means to you, how you work with that. I think this will be so helpful for everyone that's listening. Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't think about what is our higher self. So, and then I'll talk about the value of connecting and reaching out to your higher self. So, um, the bottom line, which I'm sure, Julie, and many listeners probably know, is that when we plan a lifetime, we pre-plan certain elements. Now, we always have free will when we come to Earth, but we pre-plan tall, short, light skin, dark skin, born in the United States, born in Sudan, born wherever. Many things are pre-planned, and we have free will. When we create that pre-birth contract, and we create it with the support of our guides, then with our guides, we discuss what percentage, what slice, what holographic slice of our soul energy will we bring into body to live and breathe once we're born and the umbilical cord is cut. And the remainder of our soul energy is our higher self. We are soul and body, soul and spirit at all times. And our higher self is one of our guides because it's an aspect of us and a composite, or maybe better said, sort of like a repository of all our experiences and our soul nature. So a lot of people forget to reach out for support to their higher self. And then I'll add one more piece that often a lot of people don't talk about or think about. Our higher self, let me back up a step. as we evolve as a soul, and we evolve primarily through incarnation, we evolve primarily in body, not out of body. As we evolve, our higher self, our soul, takes on more and more responsibility at the soul level to do coordination work, because souls work together in the higher realm, basically, I mean, in a way to coordinate the higher realm. But overall, if we focus on Earth and humanity, souls work together in the higher realm as guides to do what they can to guide humans for us to make, hopefully, healthy choices as in our individual lives and in our group lives, healthy choices. So our higher self has roles and responsibilities.
So beautiful and powerful. And I love this conversation. We talk about this a lot here. And so I'm just going to ask some questions that are bubbling up, which is, so we have our higher self. It almost feels to me, Linda, I don't know if this is, you have like the ocean, and then who we are in this life is like a bucket full of that bigger ocean. Let's get into guides. When we talk about guides, like I'm now thinking, are my guides like having a fun party with my higher self? Like, are they all working together? Are they all connected? I'm sort of making, light of it. But for me, it helps when I think of my spirit guide or guides, my higher self, like it helps to kind of personify it because we're human, right?
Sure, sure.
Can you share? So we have our higher self, which I would assume is us in every lifetime. We always are connected
Correct.
to our higher self.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And our guides. So my feeling has always been our guides. Some have never been human. Some might have been human, might be
Mm,
aspects of ourself, of the higher angelic realm. Let's talk about guides for a minute, because it can
yeah.
get confusing. Like there's your spirit guide, your team of guides. You've been doing this so long. What do you know?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I love that because, and when you say, what do you know? I want listeners to kind of hear this loud and clear. What I say I know comes from
Yes.
regression after regression after regression, and about maybe 29 years worth of regression, where I'm looking for overlap of what
Yes.
clients are telling me, along with my mentor, who did a lot of this work many, many years ago. So, to not make this overly complicated, but also to be fairly specific. Um, okay, my brain is saying, okay, and I'm saying to my guides, how do I make this simple when it's
Yeah.
not simple?
Yeah.
Uh,
Ask your guides.
exactly, exactly, or let them speak through me. Yeah.
That's right.
Um, about 95% of humans are obviously incarnate souls, and they are what I call, this is the term I was given years ago, about 95% of humans are earth-based souls. So
Okay.
what does that mean? An earth-based soul is a soul that was created, was conceived to primarily incarnate on earth and intended to evolve lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. So for those approximately 95%, I want to say that probably your listeners are, how can I say this? A lot of your listeners are in the 5% that I'll talk about in a minute, or, relatively speaking, because they're spiritually oriented. I'm sure
Mm.
that's probably true for your listeners. But for an earth-based soul in regard to guides, what I know is that an earth-based soul always has a lead guide, like a senior or a main guide. And then an earth-based soul also always has a team. And so that team might be two other guides, it might be five other guides. Um, but an earth-based soul, again, always has kind of the senior leader of your guide team, so to speak, and at least one to three or four other guides. And I was going to say assistant guides, but I don't mean to say that they're necessarily that much less evolved than your lead guide. So everybody out there, and we can probably talk as we discuss this, Julie's like kind of how do we begin to learn, are we an earth-based soul? But an earth-based soul has a lead and a team. There are two other types of souls that come to earth, and I'll talk about those separately and just mention guides. So one of those other types of souls is what I was taught to call an interplanetary soul. That's the term I use, but exchange that with ET, starseed, it all means the same. There are interplanetary souls that agree to come to Earth. Why do they agree to come to Earth? They come from somewhere in the universe that's not tied to Earth's frequency. They agree to come to Earth because they are the interplanetary or IP souls that come to Earth always come from a healthy culture in the celestial realm. Earth is trying to be a healthy culture, but Earth is not, as I think we all know, not yet fully, if ever, who knows, a healthy culture. So an interplanetary soul comes from a planet, a star system, an interdimensional space. They do sometimes come from UFOs. Um, I can say more about that in a minute. But the point is that an interplanetary soul sometimes has a lead guide, a senior guide, and not a team. And oftentimes an interplanetary soul is exclusively guided by their higher self. It's because their higher self is so wise and so evolved. And so for me, about maybe 70% of all the IP clients that I work with, their higher self is their main and only guide. And that guide is perfectly capable. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, they're left high and dry. They're not in any way left high and dry. So that's an IP soul. Then lastly, there's one other type of soul. I learned this because of my client work. There are souls that come to Earth from the angelic realm. They are angelic souls. So what is an angelic soul? An angelic soul, or an angelic realm soul, as I often say, belongs to the cadre of souls that serve Source. They are the emissaries, the ambassadors of Source energy. And what that means, and words usually are insufficient, but they carry love, compassion, non-judgment. When I work with them and meet them as people, they are, I know you get this because I know a bit about the work that you do. They are some of the most caring, compassionate, and it almost blows me away how non-judgmental they are. So angelic realm souls in small numbers come to Earth, and they are a bit like interplanetary souls. Sometimes they have a lead guide that's another angelic soul. It could be an archangel, but it isn't always an archangel. But often they're guided by their higher self because, again, their higher self is so vastly evolved. So, as you can see, we're never left without guidance, but it does vary depending on the what I call soul origin, our own soul origin. Yeah.
Whew, I'm having my own visceral reaction, which maybe we'll get to, just anyhow, tuning in to what you're saying and feeling. And I can feel anyone who's attracted to this, it's making me actually want to cry at a very, it's like, yeah, I'm just holding back tears. There's something about what you're saying that's so true. And I've known, and I can imagine like attracts like those that are watching. I'm just crying with you. I can feel it. Like these beautiful souls that come into this channel here, literally, I feel them, and it's, I have this feeling that the majority of who we're talking to are either in these categories. I just feel it. Um, anyhow, I will share another time some memories I've had, but this is so beautiful. And I guess my question to you, Linda, I'm going to just compose myself because it's really touching me at such a
I love your
level.
reaction. So that's great. Yeah.
I'm like,
Because it's
this
so
is,
meaningful.
yeah, no, it's explaining. I know I'm not speaking for myself. Actually, as I speak, I know I'm speaking for many, many, just from reading the comments. This is like many of us who are like, oh, this is explaining to me what I've always felt something's different. Something is different here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, let's talk about how to find out if someone hasn't done a regression, like listening now, because I know the question is, how do I know? I have a sense, but I'd love to hear from you. This is your expertise. How do we know what category we fall into, and what does that mean, and how can we use that to be of greater service here? Because I can think we're all here. I can tell you 100%, anybody listening, anybody here in their heart, there's a big desire to add, love and to be making a difference and being of service in this planet to raise consciousness. I know that. So
Right.
how do
Right.
we find out our souls? How do we use it to make a difference?
Yeah. Awesome. Um, well, first thing I'll start by saying is that anyone who is overtly spiritual and is drawn to your work, to my work, to spiritual books, to other, I did an interview in the middle of the night last night on Coast to Coast AM, is drawn to, you probably know Coast to Coast AM. So anyone that's drawn to broader understanding, knowing that we're more than this life, this body, anyone that fits those categories is not a young soul. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being a young soul. We were all young souls at one point in time. And, have worked to climb the ladder, and we're still working to climb the ladder. Um, so that's part of the reason that it resonates, and brings people together to focus. So how do we know which type of soul we are, and then how are we of service? Which I think is the basic question. So a little hard. I'll do my best to put words to it. I think some people can figure it out without regression. Some people can certainly figure it out by working with you, capable channels, that sort of thing. I love regression because I don't give the information to the client. They give it to me with my support. Um, so if someone is an earth-based soul, so I'm an earth-based soul. Years ago, I asked my guides, as I was learning about not just earth-based souls, but interplanetary and angelic souls, I said to my guides, so why are you bringing all these, non-earth-based souls into my practice? And they basically said, Linda, because often IP souls, and I'll just kind of use the lingo to make it simple, IP souls and AR, angelic realm souls, need support to know there's nothing wrong with them, to know they are exactly the way they're meant to be, but they really, really know they're different. So, okay, so if we're an earth-based soul, what that tends to mean, yeah, for sure, what that means is an earth-based soul has had probably hundreds, if not 1,000 or more lives here on this planet. And to a degree, I'll say we, since I'm an earth-based soul. And a quick aside, sometimes people think I'm saying earthbound. And I'm not saying earthbound because that's a different spiritual terminology that means something else. So I'm saying earth-based. Um, an earth an earth-based soul has a lot of human experience. That doesn't mean they've cleaned up all their karma. That doesn't mean they're a 10 on a scale of 10 in terms of evolution. But it means we as earth-based souls are fairly comfortable in a human body on this planet. And a lot of that means not a huge amount of health problems, not a huge amount of allergies, somewhat accepting, underscore, somewhat accepting of human behavior. So that's an earth-based soul. An interplanetary soul has usually not been here more than 100 times. That's a very small number. An interplanetary soul usually, not always, but usually has some kind of emotional, physical moderately sizable to sizable issues: allergies, autoimmune disorders, autistic spectrum, digestive issues, fairly substantial, very sensitive to energy, to inhalants, and that kind of thing. Yet they're always highly evolved. They always have some major skill or skills. So that's an interplanetary soul. And often interplanetary souls, one piece that people might find interesting, often if I'm regressing an interplanetary soul, either during the interview or after the regression, the client will say to me, I was told that as a child at age 4, 5, 6, all I wanted to do is stand by the window at night and stare out at the night sky. And that's where I wanted to be, because that's home is out there somewhere. That's an interplanetary soul. Um, an angelic realm soul, I've heard some of the things. I worked with a couple of recently angelic realm souls that are, some are formally credentialed clergy. Some have become, spiritually oriented clergy, like unity and science of mind and all of that. And sometimes they will say to me, Linda, I know this is going to sound weird, but I just love source or God or great spirit, whatever term they use. I just love the divine in ways I can't explain, and it doesn't really make sense, but I just love the divine. It's because they're tied so directly to source. So then, to talk about to be of service, um, the a lot of the angelic souls that I work with, it's so hard to put language to this. A lot of the angelic souls I work with are these, it's almost like they have these broad, people can see these broad open arms where they just want to envelop and embrace almost anyone and everyone, to support them, to love them, to teach them they're worthy. It's a very all-inclusive attitude, which is just beautiful. Interplanetary souls um, are very different than angelic realm souls. They are often highly creative in IT endeavors. They might create the most unique app that nobody's ever even thought about. They might, on the surface, look a little bit unusual. They might have 3 colors in their hair and, 4 or 5 rings in each ear and wear combinations of patterns that a lot of us might not wear. That's because they're interplanetary souls. Yet they're wise, and they usually have some track of skills, whether it's music, IT, whatever it might be. Sometimes they're entertainers. Um, I don't know this, but it just popped. I don't know this for sure, but it makes me think about Billie Eilish. I mean, Billie Eilish is so creative. Do I know that she's IP? No, I've not regressed Billie Eilish. But I wouldn't be surprised that she's an interplanetary soul, just to use a public figure as an example. And then those of us as earth-based souls, if people think about some of the most, if I can say this, I could hear my very, very adult son laughing at me. If people will bring to mind one politician or political leader, living or not living, that you highly respect, often those political leaders are earth-based souls, because they need the earth experience, and there are capable, credible, healthy political leaders, even though we have a lot that aren't. So but there's lots of ways to be of service. We can be of service in our neighborhood and take care of a couple of neighbors who have illness, and that's our service.
Hey, my love, it's Julie. I just wanted to pop in here really quickly to share something very exciting for you. Being a part of this beautiful US2U podcast family, I wanted to share a special that I have going right now. I am opening the doors now to my intuition school. This is going to help you to really learn how to use your intuition as your inner GPS. Your intuition is literally your superpower. It has healed and changed my life, and I want to help you to do the same. Go to juliereisler.com/intuition school and use the code podcast97 to get $97 off of tuition. So here's the thing. There are 9 modules. I'm going to teach it to you live every week. You have everything recorded. We're going to dive deep, all things woo, wisdom of oneness, as you know, learning how to muscle test, learning how to connect with your spirit guides, your higher self, learning how to assess your energy system and your chakras, and so, so much more. Go check it out at juliereisler.com/intuition school. And if your soul is feeling a calling, a nudge to do this, be sure to use the special code podcast97. I would love to have you there. I'd be honored to be part of your journey in activating your most powerful asset, your intuition. Sending love always. I hope to see you there. Yeah, beautiful. You read my mind. I was going to ask if you have any examples. I know not regressing Billie Eilish, but is there someone that comes to mind that you think would be an example of the angelic realm, just for everyone to get their kind of hands around? Although I can feel what you're saying at a very deep level.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I can talk about a very old and long-standing Earth-based soul that continues to incarnate to help the planet.
Who's that? Yeah, let's start with there.
Okay. So there are some Earth-based souls that have been coming here for thousands of years. The soul that we might easily label, I'm not waxing into religion here, but the soul that we might label as the Moses soul, the actual soul that was that person when the person Moses was alive, that's a very long-standing earth-based soul. And because I've, sort of cross-validated this a number of times, that soul was Gandhi. That soul was Nelson Mandela. That soul has current incarnations. Some are political figures, some are not. But that's a soul, there are other souls like this. That's a soul that keeps coming into body and at times has more than one simultaneous incarnation to aid humanity. Almost like, more than one finger on the planet, but 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 fingers, bit different people on the planet. It's interesting. I'm thinking about angelic souls, and the ones I keep thinking about are people I know personally that I can't, sort of out as people. I'll give an example of someone that has passed that people, I'm not going to use a name because people might not know this person, but this might be a very useful example. So this is a man. This is a man who grew up in a very strongly American family with French Canadian roots, very Catholic, grandfather a priest, father a priest, large, as Catholics might be, large family, many priests in the family. He became an ordained Catholic priest. And for years, he loved being a priest. Very warm, gregarious, one of these slightly overweight, enveloping, loving people. Liked being a priest for about, I don't know, 12 to 15 years, and then just found certain aspects of religion too structured, too dogmatic, just didn't resonate for him anymore. So he left the priesthood. And for a small period of time, he became a beautiful trainer in corporate settings, and he's now on the other side. So he was funny. I mean, just really good at what he did. Then he retooled, and he became a science of mind minister, a minister in one of these pockets of spiritual ministry. And he had a very large following in his own spiritual community. Very warm, very loving, really struggled with how warm, loving, and all accepting that he was, because sometimes, he was emotionally hurt through that process. He came for a regression, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And during his regression, and I didn't know this until I guided the regression, he discovered he's an angelic realm soul. And so he discovered an understanding of his love of the divine, uh, but also the need to be here to teach truth and not just to teach dogma. But it made so much sense to him to discover he was an angelic soul, just the sweetest, kindest, most caring man you'd ever want to meet.
So, such a great, thank you for sharing that. And, what I'm really getting is we all have our different experiences and purpose and ways of showing up to add love, to be of service, to add value, whether it's in your home, with your children, with your grandchildren, with your pets, with your community. Really, really beautiful. One of the questions I sometimes hear questions that come in, and what I'm hearing is, so, okay, we have Moses, earthbound soul. Then we have, of course, big character, big, beautiful figure most of us know, right? So I actually am curious with both Jesus and with somebody like a Mary Magdalene, who is becoming more and more studied. More questions on that for another time. You'll come back.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, for those two, do those come up in regressions? Would those be angelic realm souls? That would be my guess, but I am curious.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Yes, they do come up in regression and have come up many times for me. And I have some of my own my own personal past life knowledge of those souls in past lives I had pre-crucifixion. So you might be surprised, and well, I have no doubt what I'm about to say is true because it's been repeated so many times in regression. But then there's a kind of a twist that explains the whole thing. The soul of the one we call Jesus, and I always say that we call Jesus because most people know when that soul was alive, that soul's name wasn't Jesus.
Yeshua, right?
Yes, correct,
Yeah, not.
correct.
I know,
Right.
right?
The one we call Jesus of Nazareth.
Yes.
Obviously,
Yeah,
Jesus is a Greek word, and that's the name that was
yeah,
given to him post crucifixion. Yeah. So his name was Yeshua ben Yosef, or
yeah.
Yeshua, son of Joseph.
Joseph. Yeah.
Um, yeah. The soul of Jesus. Jesus is an ascended master. Is an ascended guide. If people will, and probably most spiritual people do this anyway, if people will remove him from Christianity, because he didn't found Christianity at all. Um, Yeshua is an earth-based soul.
Mm.
Um, he is an earth-based soul. When Christians talk about him being the Son of God, I think what that truly means is he's an emissary of high frequency guidance that we might call God. He's not literally the son of God. Um, Yeshua is a highly evolved earth-based soul. We could talk about how the earth spiritual realm is coordinated, which I've learned a lot about over years of clients. Um, but the reason people begin to think that he's angelic is because of the teachings he brought, is because of the he was all inclusive and he was teaching about love and caring. But I have no doubt he is an ascended guide, um, and is not an angelic and is not an interplanetary soul. But something I've heard in the last, maybe 2 or 3 years repetitively, um, Yeshua, as a soul, has taken on responsibility to, how can I say this, to expand connection and sharing of wisdom between Earth and other advanced interplanetary locations. So he has some responsibilities to make those links in the higher realm. Yeah. Mary Magdalene is also an earth-based soul, and of course is an advanced earth-based soul, um, just as is the soul that we call Mother Mary. Of course, the other Mary, and the Mary that's a generation older than Yeshua was and Mary Magdalene was. But Mary Magdalene is an earth-based soul, and I actually know that both Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary, those two souls, they continue to incarnate on Earth to aid Earth, but they are both Earth-based souls.
Very, very interesting. So, oh my gosh, my just all these beautiful questions. Thank you for sharing that. And I think what's so fascinating is you doing all these regressions, seeing the pattern, seeing it come up over and over and over again. And for anyone, just to go back with the regression, you are regressing to the higher self, higher consciousness, to the not the Linda or Julie, but to the higher self that is infinite, that is, just to be
Yes,
clear.
to the
Yeah,
Linda or Julie higher self,
that's
to
right.
your, if I was theoretically Julie regressing you, to your highest level of your soul's evolution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask, I do want to get to the earth realm and the different kind of coordinates or levels. But before that, there's a term, and I don't know if this has come up. I learned about this. I had been selected. I did a week study experience. This was quite, this is after I had a very deep awakening, and I studied with Teal Swan. If you know her, she does a lot around, she's, I think, an interplanetary soul, I would guess, but I would think so. I don't know for sure, but this week was one of the more interesting weeks of my lifetime. 40 of us from all over the world, and she talked a lot about soul streams, and I was like, my husband, who I know is an earthbound, like I just know, yeah. We're talking about this, like his mother sadly passed, and we were just connecting to her soul, and it was like, do our souls mix kind of like the clouds mix into each other? Let's talk a little bit about soul streams, souls connecting with past ones that, past loved ones on the other side. Like, do we maintain the identity of, if you're watching and your name is Cheryl or Anne or Betsy or Julie, like, will I maintain Julie and also all the other lives elsewhere, and then the overarching soul? Like, maybe we're getting granular, but I'm curious, like, what is this whole soul stream, and what happens with are there like thousands of my souls, or your soul just kind of hanging around us?
Yeah. I think the best way to answer that is primarily no. In other words, mm, but it's a great, and it's fine to get granular because I think that helps you, that helps me, that helps people listening,
Yeah.
to get as detailed as we can get. Um, so okay, maybe this will help. I'm trying to think what's the easiest way to talk about this. Um, some souls. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm asking my guides, what's the easiest way? So think about, let's make it simple first. So, your soul is in body as Julie, and you brought a holographic slice of your soul energy into your body that causes you to live and breathe.
Right.
Your higher self is a slice of your soul that carries all the
Mm.
experiences your slice of soul, if you will. So it's almost like you are a slice, so to speak, and your exact higher self is a slice of your soul.
Mm.
Let's just say theoretically, you had what we call a split incarnation right now. Split incarnation means, okay, a different slice of your soul is animating another human, and that, well, let's just call that, we'll assume that's a man, for example. Let's call that John, for
Okay.
the sake of example.
Hey,
So
John.
yeah, exactly. Maybe you'll
Hey.
meet John. Who knows? And that
Yeah.
does happen on occasion. So John is a different slice of your soul energy that causes John to be alive. And John's specific higher self is a different, a separate slice
Yep.
of the totality of your soul energy. His higher self is a different slice than yours. Make sense?
Fantastic. Yes. So a personal question. I don't usually ask personal questions, but so I'm going to out myself a little.
Okay.
I've had feelings slash memories, not the right word, of another aspect of myself now
Mm-hmm.
in some other dimension that is not here. To be honest, it's very watery, flowy. I don't even,
Okay.
it's pink moving. I've tried to draw it. It's hard
Mm,
to, but what I can tell you when I saw Wonder Woman, the energy around those women, that
mm,
powerful force,
mm.
something got, I mean, it was not what I was expecting. And I had this feeling and memory. Oh my gosh, that energy. There's a part of me somewhere else
Okay.
that is in this realm. And so it's not here. And so I'm assuming I am not the only one, but maybe this has been my experience. And sometimes I can feel it and it's a very powerful, but it's lighter in density. I mean, it doesn't look
Yeah.
like human. I can't see a face. It just feels like, I don't know how to explain it. But so would
Yeah.
that also be a soul, a part of my soul that is also living somewhere else?
Okay. So let me ask you one question and then I'll tell you my hunch. Do you have a hit or a sense, Julie, whether you're Earth-based, interplanetary, or angelic? Do you have any hunches?
Well, yes, when you talked about first I thought interplanetary, and then when you started talking about the angelic realm, the whole love and like it makes me want to cry. So it feels, I mean, I could cry. I don't, yeah, this is so vulnerable. It's so
Mm.
great. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
We're just gonna,
Yeah.
this is what
Yeah.
we do here, but this is why I do this show is I
Yeah.
know I'm not the only
Great.
one and it's all good. I just out myself every time, but no, I can't explain it. It's something, that would be the one I resonated with. Now, could I be an earth-based soul? Maybe too. I am very sensitive to a lot of things, including digestion. Yeah, I was like, okay. But this desire to help people feel loved and worthy, it's like I cannot not do that. It is driving me nonstop in a beautiful way. I'm getting hot.
Right.
And this energy that I can feel somewhere else, it's hard to explain, but I feel like there's a lot of wisdom that is not verbal that
Yeah.
is
Right.
coming from there. So that's all I can,
I
yeah,
mean, as I always say to people, I would much prefer to regress you than to give you my hunches, but I'm willing to give you my hunches. My
yeah.
hunch is that you're an interplanetary soul
Mm,
and that you're sensing probably your interplanetary soul energy. So,
yeah.
just as an example, and maybe this will help. Um, Let me see. Again, I'm pausing so I make this clear and not overly complicated. So obviously, maybe some people know, but I'll just say I train people in how to guide regression. So I offer regression training. So I train people in the model that I've already explained about. We go to past life, blah, blah, blah. We go to the end point of the past life, and then we connect to the client's higher self. Um, what I also do when I'm teaching regression is I say to the participants that, oh, at least maybe 5 times out of 10, let me say this differently. If I'm guiding an interplanetary soul, and sometimes if I'm guiding an angelic soul, but I don't yet know what type of soul my client is, if I'm guiding an IP or an AR soul, and in particular, if the person is an IP soul, even though my languaging is now we're going to go to a past life, because that's what I'm guiding verbally, the client will go directly to their soul level. It's sort of like do not pass go, do not collect $200 type thing. It's like, it doesn't matter what my words are. The client will begin to describe to me. Fortunately, I've worked with so many interplanetary and angelic souls that I begin to know what's happening when the descriptions begin. And if my client goes directly to their home location in the celestial realm because they're interplanetary, they begin to describe energy and colors and nothing malevolent. So I want people to know it's not malevolent, but they begin to describe shapes that aren't human, physical containers, physical beings that aren't human because they've gone directly home.
Yeah.
They go to their home location, just like me snapping my fingers,
Yep.
because that's what their guides want them to do.
Mm,
And they never go to a past life. My hunch is what you're describing has something to do with your home location.
mm,
That's a hunch. Yeah.
hmm And I
How
have
does
a
that feel?
feeling,
Yeah.
no, that's, yeah, no, that feels, and I know others listening. The reason
Mhm.
and I'm always, what I'm hearing is share this because I'm not, anyone listening is going to connect and have their own experience of this, which makes me so happy to,
Totally.
this will be helpful for so many. I, um, I think this is so fascinating, and to get, again, of course, there's no good or bad, or there's no judgment about wherever we land. What
Sure.
I'm getting is it can help. And by the way, for everyone listening, we'll have all your information for anyone who wants to do a regression or learn how to do regressions.
Yeah.
Um, I just resonate with what you're saying. Now, for people who might know of terms like Sirius or the Palladians, these
Mhm.
star systems, are we, that's kind of, there must be infinite amounts, but are these some of what we're talking about when we talk about interplanetary
Y-
um, souls going to
Yes.
places like
What
that?
what I find is that the majority of interplanetary souls that I regress, their home location is somewhere within, I always laugh with this, it's somewhere within what we call the solar system because we're so egocentric about being on Earth, we call it the
Yeah.
solar system. Most of my clients that are interplanetary come from somewhere within, inside of the solar system, a planet, a star system, an interdimensional location. I do at times have clients from outside of the solar system. But yes, but we're talking about Pleiades and Arcturus and those kinds of places. But at the same time, often the locations where my clients come from are not familiar locations, so the name is meaningless.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Beautiful. That was super helpful. Let's talk about the earth realm and some of the different. So it's interesting. I've had Ainsley McLeod on here who talked about the different soul levels, which I would imagine is earthbound. This is so fun. Oh my God, we're getting like all geeky on this. I love it. Because my head is like, oh yeah, we talked about new souls and old souls. But from your experience with
Yeah.
regression, let's get
Yeah.
into the earth realm since 95% are there. And we have, I mean, if Yeshua, Jesus was an earth, like there's some incredible wisdom and beauty in the earth
Okay.
realm as well. Let's go there for a moment since we are on earth.
Yeah. 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 So what are you asking? I'm not sure. What are you asking
Okay.
about earth-based souls?
Let's talk about the different realms, the different, I stopped
Mhm.
to use the word level because I really don't want to, have this connotation of higher level is better. So we're going to
Yeah.
say this in a way that's, if we can
Right.
all listen with our heart and take out the
Yeah. Isn't loaded with good,
yes,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like let's, from what you've learned from regressions, the different paths, the different realms of being an earth-based soul,
Okay. Okay.
levels
Yeah.
without the loaded aspect to it.
Yeah. 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 Well, okay. If we're an earth-based soul and we die, we pass, we transition from an incarnation on Earth, and our soul energy operates on autopilot. So the slice of soul that resides within us that animates us and causes us to be alive automatically steps out of the body when cardiopulmonary functions have stopped. And that soul energy gradually elevates, leaving 3D and working through the levels of what we call the astral plane or fourth dimension. So that slice of soul gradually moves, we might say, higher and higher. Often, you probably know this, that sometimes that slice of soul will hover close to Earth for some, not a huge long time, but often long enough for the funeral and the burial to happen, long enough to the children have been informed and, blah, blah, blah. May hover close, but then begins its gradual elevation journey. And fourth dimension, or the astral plane, as I'm sure you and listeners know, is the energetic space between Earth and the higher realm. The slice of soul, though, is ultimately on its way to step back into the higher self, to join back, if this is the higher self, to join back with the higher self. And depending on our level of soul evolution, that determines, is our higher self at the first level of the fifth dimension? If we're trying to talk about the higher realm that's tied to Earth. But the more evolved souls, if we're trying to say where are they located, we're talking about something that's physical but not physical. More evolved souls, the Moses soul, that higher self resides at levels far and above the first level of the fifth dimension. And there are groups of souls that work together in the higher realm to work to determine, it's a bit like a parliament or a congress or what I call the Earth High Council. There is an Earth High Council. It's made up of experienced Earth-based souls. They don't always agree, but they work much more effectively, we might say, than the United States Congress. They work together without being critical of each other, but they don't always agree. They work together to come up with intentions and plans to try to help humanity through guidance. But they exist above the first level of the fifth dimension. So again, I hope that's helpful. Yeah.
Yes. I'm going to need to have you come back, Linda. We're going to have to do
Okay,
the
that sounds great.
dimensions. We can weave in some other, yeah. I'm just
That would
telling
be
you,
fun.
we're going to make a level round 2. I will take questions from anyone listening. So if you want to leave comments, especially for those of you who join over on YouTube where you can drop comments, leave your questions. We can come back and get your questions so we can bring Linda back, because this is fascinating. And I think what's so cool is the 29 years you've had, this is coming from observation, from time after time, hearing people, everyday human beings that are regressed. And it's like you're sifting for gold. I mean, this to me is like we're getting this beautiful gold here. I mean, this is so
It's
beautiful.
fascinating. Yeah.
I want to end with one of my last questions is, from all of the different descriptions that have come through, what's your experience and concept of source, of the divine, of God, whatever you call it?
You're obviously guided to ask that question, so I love that. I have I'll just say, a fairly clear notion of that, for a couple of reasons. One, I've asked that kind of question to clients over and over and over. Two, I have one or two people that I know well that are very capable channels, and I ask them questions and I look for cross validation. So my understanding of God, source, the divine, I was raised in a Jewish family. Judaism has some beautiful Hebrew words for God. And lots of other cultures have beautiful terminology. It's my understanding that when Earth was ready for intelligent life, for intelligent soul incarnation. A group of 4 souls was a group of 4 interplanetary souls with great wisdom and great perspective were brought together by a higher level that I always say is above my pay grade. I can't really explain that, but it's my understanding that Source is a conglomerate soul of a conglomerate group of 4 highly evolved interplanetary souls that do what they can to guide Earth, and they work directly with the Earth High Council. They also have communication with interplanetary councils and angelic councils. So they're receiving input from, you might say, the 3 high coordinating groups of the 3 types of souls. And they do what they can to guide us forward as humans. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely beautiful. Last question. We call them heart flares here. Any heart flare, anything that I didn't ask that is just right there, or something your heart would like to share that's left for you to say? I always love to leave a moment for that.
I love just letting whatever pops in, pop in. What comes to me, Julie, when you talk about, that's a beautiful term that I've not heard used before, when you talk about a heart flare, what I would say is to say to everybody listening, follow your own heart flare, because when a heart flare pops in, it's popping in for a reason. Don't dismiss it. Listen to it and let it take you where it needs to take you.
Gorgeous. Oh my gosh. Linda, Dr. Linda Backman, thank you from my heart and from the thousands and thousands and thousands of hearts that are tuning in, at some point millions, and just really appreciate this work you're doing. We will have to find a time for round 2. This is what happens when I can't even help myself. There's so many more questions that are coming, but I'm aware of our beautiful listener view, and your time and energy will bring you back. This has been such a gift. Thank you for sharing all of these gems that you have been collecting over the last 29 plus years, and for sharing your heart, your energy, your wisdom. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And I'm going to just end by, lastly, together we are thanking you, our beloved listener. Thank you. Thank you. This show, as you know, being your youest you is connecting to your higher self. And I'm so excited because I think this is one of the first times. Listen to this again and again. Share it with anybody who is on the spiritual journey, who is like, how do I tap into my higher self? What does that mean? We talked about that. That is the purpose of your youest you here. And we all have it, as Linda explained. And so may you really honor that your higher self is guiding you, and that is your youest you. And may we all be blessed by the light that you're here to shine. So much love and light always.